Hello everybody, Captain Siddharth here. Today we are celebrating a very special game for me, something I loved to play on my N64 26 years ago. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. After rediscovering my love for it, I just had to invite more or less the community leader, Lightning Pirate, to have a nice little chat. And yeah, I would say hello there, how are you doing?
Hello there. I'm doing great, and thank you so much for reaching out. And I'm looking forward to speaking about this game, and especially the community that has sort of centered around it.
Yeah, I'm totally happy that you joined me, and I'm so curious about this community. I wouldn't have expected that this game survived the test of time. But before we go into it, I would like to know a little bit about you. What do you do maybe in real life? How did you get into the Star Wars franchise? Little things.
For sure, yeah. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in Oregon, and I currently live in North Carolina in the States. I work full time as a graphic and web designer. I love to code, design, make music in my free time. I'm the kind of person that has way too many projects going on, and I'm always accepting new projects when I shouldn't be. But yeah, I got into Star Wars like I think a lot of people my age got into Star Wars. My dad was like he like grew up during the original trilogy, so like he's obviously a big Star Wars fan. And then I grew up during like the prequel trilogy, so it's like all over in the games, in the in the toy aisle. It's just all over the place. It's on TV, in the commercials. So like it was hard to not get into Star Wars at that time, I would say.
You mentioned the prequels. Did you also watch as a child the Clone Wars TV show, or did you skip it? Was it later for you?
I do remember when the Clone Wars movie came out, and I was like, okay, this is kind of weird because it's like cartoon Star Wars, and I don't know why, but it just didn't really connect for me at the time. But then, like later, for some reason, I definitely watched the Clone Wars TV, especially like as the final season came out. That was a really fun time to get into it.
You mean the season 6 or the season 7 as latest season?
I think it was season 7 was the final season of Clone Wars.
The one which came just out before Corona hit us.
Yeah, I think that was the timing, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because there was a big time gap between the release of season 6 and 7. I also didn't watch the show when it was released. I watched it years later after I watched Rebels. I loved Star Wars Rebels, and I thought, hey, I know Clone Wars didn't really interest me back then, but I give it a chance because I like the characters now. Let's give it a go, and I fall in love with it.
Nice.
And yeah, in the same sense, I of course have to ask you, what is your favorite content of the Star Wars franchise? Is it the prequels, Clone Wars, the original trilogy? What is it?
I mean, I think it goes without saying that it's definitely the pod racing in episode 1. I think a lot of us fell in love with that, and that's kind of the reason we're all kind of attached to this game so much. Besides that, I would say just the the video games too is like the LucasArts era has such a great track record when it comes to the sort of movie tie-in games with Star Wars.
Since you just mentioned the very important thing here, the racers. How did you get into Star Wars Episode 1 Racer the game?
So I had to be like 8 or 9 or 10. I don't really recall how I got the game, but I remember like during that time there was like cereal box promotions. Like you could get a PC game in a cereal box. I don't know if it was that or if we just bought it outright, but I didn't grow up on like N64. I grew up on like a hand-me-down family PC with like the thick monitor. So yeah, that's how I grew up playing the game. I think there's a childhood photo of me somewhere at my parents' house where I'm playing the game on that PC. and I'm playing with like a joystick controller, you know, like the flight sim controller. I would say that's how like I got into it, which is the same way a lot of others got into it, is like during their childhood. Like that game was around, especially for N64 players. Like it's considered kind of a N64 classic, like you say.
It definitely is a classic game on the N64, but I'm also curious, do you think most people played it on that platform or was it on the PC?
I think for sure it's the N64. I think I'm kind of rare in the fact that I played it exclusively on PC. I think there's some others in the community who have grown up with it on like Dreamcast, for example. But I believe it only came out on PC, N64, Dreamcast, and then maybe Mac originally.
And what would you say is the current situation? I guess most players now play the PC version.
For sure, yeah. I remember like in the 2010s, around that time, I was like, I randomly remembered this game, and I was wondering about how to play it again on PC. And I remember at the time searching online, like trying to find a way to play it, and there wasn't really like a great way to get it working. Like you had to maybe emulate an N64 or like an older version of Windows in order to play it. Like it was really tough to find a way to play it. And then in 2018, I don't know how I found out, but I saw it on Steam and I was like, no way, is this actually back? And I would say that was like a huge like moment for the game, was to get it re-released on Steam and on like Good Old Games. So yeah, that moment in like 2018 when it re-released on PC was like big for the community, because that's like the reason that we have like the people we have today. Is like the Steam forums had all this like troubleshooting knowledge and like other stuff, like guides and stuff to help new players. So that was huge for like the kind of revival of the game. And then of course the next big moment was the Aspire ports. When Aspire announced they would port Racer to the Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox, that was pretty big, because it, you know, the PC re-release had its issues where it didn't really, I mean, to this day, it has its issues where there's a lot of stuff you need to finagle and get around in order to actually get the game working properly. And those ports actually did the favor to, you know, more the casual or like more console playing community, that they don't have to deal with that hassle, and they can actually like relive the game on modern systems with some minor upgrades here and there. Definitely not a remaster, but a decent enough port.
So for once they didn't do such a terrible release like the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection.
I was hoping you would mention that, but I guess initially it definitely felt that way for like a community that had our eyes on the game like so much. There was definitely a lot of nitpicking. Like, for example, the control scheme is a huge impact on the gameplay. So when we saw that you couldn't really customize your controls on the ports, it became clear that it wouldn't be as competitive, especially in like the speed running sense, because of a limitation in like how you are able to charge your boost and turn at the same time. And because of the control scheme that was like preset in the ports, it did not allow you to do that. So that was a kind of a limiting factor. Another thing was like and we'll definitely talk about this more, but the frame rate issue. This game, like many other games, when the frame rate changes, the physics of the game will widely vary. So for example, if you're on lower FPS, you will have much looser traction and other sort of slight variations in gameplay. And then versus when you're on higher FPS, like the ports were released at like 60 FPS, you almost have no sliding ability. So that is another ability that speedrunners rely on in order to cut corners more easily and really maximize their speed through corners. So that's in purely the speedrunning sense. That's kind of the long-winded answer of it is not a viable port uh, for specifically that corner of the community.
Talking about the different versions, what would you, on the one side, recommend everybody to play? And is it important for PC player to pick a special version? For example, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but Empire at War, you should buy on Steam and not GOG because the Steam version is a little bit more patched and more stable. Is it similar in the Episode 1 Racer community?
I would say so, definitely. Between console versus PC, I definitely want to recommend PC, not only for the speedrunning implications, like if you are interested in becoming a speedrunner for the game, or the modding scene. Obviously, with the console ports, you won't really have access to the modding tools that are currently in development. So that's a major factor in deciding between the console versus PC. And then on the PC version, I would definitely say there is a slight difference between the Steam versus the GOG re-release. The Steam has your DRM, and then it also has just a slight skybox bug, which is like where the sky on certain planets will be totally the wrong color. It's just a quirky little visual bug, and that can be resolved with DG Voodoo pretty easily. But it turns out that that bug does not exist at all on the GOG version. Ultimately, it's about where you keep your games. I know a lot of PC players might have Steam and GOG already, so it ultimately doesn't matter for them. But if you haven't bought it yet, GOG, I guess, is the more recommended option, but it is only a slight difference.
And there aren't any problems for the multiplayer side of the game if you have one version or the other?
No. I guess we can talk about the multiplayer. That's a whole other can of worms, but yeah, it no matter what version on PC, the multiplayer will work.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go there.
Sorry, one more thing.
Sure, go ahead.
About that question. The original PC CD version, that might be the exception to what I just said.
Yeah, that's always an interesting aspect of retro gaming. Should you really push for the original CD version or a re-release like on GOG? Most of the times the re-release are just better and more stable.
Yeah, I agree.
But I still have a Blu-ray drive just to transfer all the discs to my NAS basically, so I have it as an ISO file and have it always available. But yeah, I'm still prefer to use the GOG or Steam versions.
Nice.
But yeah, going back to the multiplayer side, I'm wondering, is it only via a VPN playable, or do you use another tool, something like Game Ranger?
Yeah, this was kind of the multiplayer scene was kind of the reason I even ventured into the Steam community page at all, was like seeing the multiplayer option on the re-release and going, I wonder how to get that working, and then like realizing like, oh, this is it's an IP thing, like it's only over LAN. So when I saw in Steam like someone linking to the Discord, and then they mentioned something like, oh yeah, we play every Saturday at 2 or every Sunday at 2. I was like, oh no way, like people can actually play this multiplayer, like this is so cool. So like getting into that, like when I joined, or like when at that time that the re-release came out and a community was really thriving in Discord, that was when like every week people were like in the multiplayer channel, like just endlessly troubleshooting and like trying to get stuff to work. And like we went through just about every like virtual LAN provider that there is. Like I think they originally started on oh, I'm gonna blank on the name now. There were a couple.
I guess tools like Hamachi, Zero Tier,
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Redmin.
you nailed it. Yeah, those are the three right there. So yeah, we started out on Hamachi, and then we tried out Zero Tier, but ultimately I think Radmin was the best option, and I think that's the one we use currently because it already has like rooms for each game, which is super cool. And then it's just a super easy setup. Like it takes hardly any setup. So I think that became kind of the de facto VLAN option. But other than that, like going back to the question, like the multiplayer scene, like was only thriving despite the really terrible like conditions around multiplayer. Like for example, when one person in the lobby or in the race lags, the entire lobby lags. So it's it's very obvious that this game was not designed for the multiplayer experience. Like the multiplayer feature was more of an afterthought that we are still kind of dealing with the ramifications of to this day. Like for example, collisions during multiplayer, you can collide with another player, racer, but the mechanics around that were not designed to handle that interaction in any way. So really, whenever you're passing another player, you're likely just going to die. The racer will just explode. So patching that out, and then also patching upgrades in multiplayer were two of the major features to resolve in the multiplayer experience, because originally the upgrades in multiplayer are completely stock. Like you don't get to use the fully upgraded pods in multiplayer. So we had a modder that was very active very early on who was able to deliver both those things, and that was like a huge thing that breathed a lot of life into the multiplayer scene at that kind of stage.
And I think it's currently stable enough that you host multiple tournaments.
So the tournaments that we currently host are not within multiplayer. We kind of do it in a janky way where one person will stream their single player game and then another person will stream their single player game, and then we will sync it up using speed gaming as a service to sort of see both of the screens side by side. But in reality, the players do not know where their opponent is in the race, which adds a little bit of a fun mechanic to our tournaments where they're sort of racing in the blind. But the multiplayer feature currently is not, I would say, in desperate need of revival. We only really play multiplayer nowadays once in a blue moon when a new player comes along and they're like, hey, I really want to try out multiplayer. And so we will like do our best to accommodate them. But really, the same excitement about multiplayer that we had in 2018 has certainly died down. And it's the one thing I would really love to try to get back for this game.
Interesting that you have still a working tournament system in place and play it locally. It's a very unique approach you have there.
Yeah. I mean, it's for the competitive integrity. I would say it's definitely needed. You wouldn't want to have like two players in the same multiplayer lobby and then there to be lag, and that would sort of sacrifice the competitive integrity of the match.
I totally understand that, but I find it also fascinating that you found such a nice workaround.
I mean, it is the best we can do with what we have at the moment, but we are constantly trying to search for ways to, deliver a better experience to not only the players, but also the audience who are watching. Like, it is a little rough to split your attention between the two screens. There have been qualifier matches where we have up to 4 racers and 4 screens on a stream. So, that I would say it easily gets a little out of hand there, but it's still a viable option currently.
Well, especially if you have a 4-player race, it's the real retro feeling for all us old Nintendo 64 players who played it basically on our LAN parties on one screen together. Everything splitted basically.
For sure. I mean, that's actually one thing missing from the PC re-release is any sort of split screen co-op that is actually functioning in the port versions, in the Aspire ports. I believe you can play 2-player co-op on all of the Aspire ports.
That's one thing I will never get. They make so many console ports to PC and always leave the co-op feature out. I never get it. Why port 99% of a game and then leave out such an important feature?
Yeah.
Since you mentioned so many different versions, I'm also a little bit curious. What versions did you play after you discovered the game on PC?
Oh, you mean versus the Steam versus GOG version, or
No, more in the sense of, did you ever rediscover the Nintendo 64 version, Dreamcast, then later maybe the Switch version?
I never really played it on N64 or Dreamcast. I've never owned a N64 or Dreamcast, but I did get into the Aspire ports for primarily the sake of documenting like all the differences, all the slight little nitpicky differences in the port that were like either broken or like just sort of side effects of the port. Like there were I actually think I made a list of like all the slight little things. I was gonna make a video at one point, but it never happened. But I think they have constantly updated those. Well, I shouldn't say constantly, but they have updated those and have resolved the major issues that did exist upon the initial releases. I mean, those ports were plagued by the the COVID era of gaming, so it was delayed like not 3 but 4 times, I want to say. And even the initial release like had just major things broken about it. Like the Switch port had like terrible audio. The Xbox port to this day has an audio issue that is only really perceivable when an Xbox player uploads their gameplay to like YouTube, and you hear the sound effects exclusively in the left channel, but the music is in both channels. So, when you're like listening to the game out of your TV, you may not notice that, but it's just like kind of a fun way to instantly go, oh yeah, I know that's an Xbox player because I can only hear the sound effects in my left ear. So it's just kind of like just fun little bugs about the ports that are somewhat frustrating, but also kind of, I think, help our efforts to verify like if there's some unidentified element to a game. Like say you're looking at footage of a racer and you're going, I wonder what console they're on or what version they're playing. These little inconsistencies actually helped you identify that pretty easily.
It's always so fascinating for me that they redo or re-release a very old game and don't even test it. A co-host of mine always phrased it this way: where was the fucking tester that they could miss such a huge bug?
It's funny you mentioned that, because when I was like thinking about doing a video for that, I actually looked at Aspire's like their actual website, and I looked under their hiring page and it said they were desperately hiring QA people at the time. I was like, oh, that is so rich that they release this and it's full of bugs, and meanwhile they are desperately looking to hire QA testers and managers.
As older gamers, we always, of course, tell the younger generations back then the games weren't that buggy when they were released. And now we're talking about a game which was released 26 years ago and it is still buggy after it's re-released on a new platform. It's unbelievable. It's really an achievement there, I have to say that.
Yeah, you couldn't really, patch the game as easily as you could. I mean, there was an official patch, I think, for like the Mac version at some point in like 2001 or 2002. But yeah, like it's not like they're gonna recall the game and then try to put out a new version like you can so easily do nowadays. You can just, you know, require that the user be connected to the internet so that you can constantly update their version.
Which is totally fine to a certain point. If the player can really play and enjoy a game without any big problems, okay. If, for example, some items are they look strange or something is behaving differently, but it doesn't kill the game mood or it breaks the game entirely, fine. Patch it a week later, a month later. But if I can't even play a game, then you have really a problem as a game developer. You mentioned that you compared the different newer versions of the game to the PC version. Where do you archive that information? Is it only on Discord? Do you also post it on Steam?
I think the majority of our knowledge as a community has been on Discord. Like all the archiving efforts, like they all get put into Discord. One thing I'm really grateful of is that initially there was like a separate speedrunning Discord and then more of a general Discord, and they decided very early on to merge the two. And so that has been a huge benefit to like the community knowledge to be all in one place and all housed under the same roof. And we have people who are really dedicated to like that effort specifically in archiving, like especially the times, but for the speedrunning scene, like archiving the history of how the speedrunning scene has evolved and more skips or glitches have been discovered. So yeah, primarily in Discord.
Then you achieved something many other games never did, sadly, merging separate Discord servers into one. So often there are 4 or even 5, 6 different Discords for just one game, and it just splits the community. It's unnecessary often.
Yeah, I agree. I feel very fortunate for this community to have achieved that very early on.
Only, I sadly have to mention it, Discord isn't really a good place to archive important information for the long run. For the near future, okay, but in the long run, I fear something could even happen with Discord. It's so uncertain how the new CEO is treating the communities. Yeah, so keep everything on your hard disk for a backup so we can have it somewhere else. I'm just saying, I'm just mentioning here.
No, I totally agree. Like I try to back up the server at a regular basis, but that only goes so far as to like capture the messages and not necessarily like all the little video snippets or, files that get dropped and shared directly within Discord. So that definitely is something that we're aware of, and that there have been efforts to kind of offload a lot of the archiving scene to, like, for example, there was one point where we had someone who approached us who wanted to do a proper wiki, but that kind of fell apart. We tried the fandom wiki, which has a whole host of issues with that side of things. But I think we are on a good trajectory to more of a homebrew effort to archive, like keep all our data ourselves versus having it, at Discord's disposal, and being able to properly document and archive everything.
Yeah, it's sadly necessary. I'm doing this whole YouTube thing now for nearly 5 years, and in all this time, I at least saw 2 Discords which got hacked and more or less basically destroyed after it. And even one leader decided to say, I have enough of this, and deleted the whole Discord overnight.
Oh, yeah, that is.
So yeah, it's a little bit dangerous to have everything on Discord.
Yeah, those kind of risks give me nightmares because I'm always like super strict with like the permissions and like constantly trying to make sure things are backed up, and hearing about stuff like that is always just kind of devastating to hear about.
But the good thing is you are aware of it and you're already backupping everything. That's really a huge plus on your side.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for members of our speedrun scene who are constantly on the lookout for like, when policies are updated, such as, privated YouTube videos going offline or the Twitch highlight limitation. They see that and then they immediately spring into action and handle like the archiving efforts that are needed to actually keep that data around. So I'm super grateful for those efforts.
It's really nice to hear that you're having such a nice working community. Often it's sadly not the case if the game is 26 years old.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that, as yeah, it's rare. Of course, I'm also curious, how did you more or less become the leader figure of this community?
Like I said, I don't want to be like called the leader, but I don't know. I definitely one of the more active people in the community. I guess the way it really all happened was in 2018, like when I joined the server, and then I really got active with the multiplayer scene. It was just this like organic thing where you had to decide what track or what racer we would pick. Like a lot of the times, if we were racing, I think, sorry, one thing I need to explain is that this game is not balanced at all. Like the racers, if you race one racer versus the other, it is extremely unbalanced. There's a racer called Ben Quadneros who is the fastest on most of the tracks, and he will beat pretty much any other racer any day on any track. So in that sense, it's like not very conducive to the multiplayer scene. So it's like you have to all play the same racer to make it balanced and fair. Anyway, so we would have, these moments where it's like, okay, well, what track and what racer should we play? And people would actually like roll a d20 on their desk, and they'd be like, oh, okay, so this number will determine this racer. So I saw that and I was like, it would be so cool if we had a bot in Discord to do that for you, like to randomly roll a track or randomly roll a racer. So that way, you could see it live happen in chat, and people could like react to it all together. So that really drove me to explore like, okay, how do I make a bot in Discord? Because at this point, I don't really have any experience in like coding or like JavaScript. It was an entirely new thing where I was first venturing out into that world. So I started making a bot, and the bot, his name is of course Botto, after Watto, the character that you see in Watto's shop and in the movie. And so at the very first stage, like I showed it to the admins at the time. I was like, so I made this bot, but I need you to add the bot to the Discord. And they were like, dude, you're an admin. Like this is like go ahead and do whatever you want. Like this is awesome. So that kind of was like the first step to like really showing, like, I guess proving like how dedicated I was to the Discord, and that little bot that I started at that moment has now evolved into this like multi layered, multi-dimensional. Like you can now play random challenges. So you can like roll a random challenge. It'll tell you to race as this racer on this track with these conditions, like 2 laps mirrored. So it has like all these things. And then it will actually, once you submit your time, it will actually reward you with truggets. So that's the currency that exists in the game that we have brought over to the Discord. I created a system around that where users in the Discord can pay each other in truggets, or you can even bet on tournament matches using the truggets that you have accumulated via these challenges or via, bets that have been upset or. So it's turned into this nightmare to code and to upkeep. And I'm constantly like, if there's one thing I'm constantly working on, it's that project to like kind of support the community and support the kind of replayability of the game and to keep people interested in playing the game. And it's also a way to sort of like harvest times for every possible racer and track and condition. So that's kind of I guess another goal of it, but ultimately it's just to make it fun.
Well, and I guess it's a good motivation for you to still play the game.
For sure. I mean, you could argue I don't really even play the game anymore. I'm really just, most of my free time is working on specifically that and really supporting other people playing the game.
Well, still, you spend a lot of time just doing housekeeping for the game, but also, learning about it. I think as we are getting older, it's harder and harder to decide, should I spend really all the time in a game or just do what is fun? Sometimes it's also learning or doing something special for this game or this IP in that sense.
I totally agree. Like, I have to credit like my current skill levels in, coding, in the skills that have made me like enticing to employers is skills that I learned in working on this game and in creating projects for this game. So it's like having that passion about the game inspired like all these learning opportunities and just a way to really develop your skills. You mentioned the time limitation. Like, yeah, it is difficult to balance that. And I sometimes think of the players who remember playing this game and then they see it re-released and they play it one time through and they go, I got my nostalgia hit. That's all the fun I need. And I can move on with my life. And I think to myself, why couldn't that have been me? Why couldn't I have just been satisfied with just that one more run through and go, okay, yeah, that's good. I can move on now. It's like, no, now we got to like squeeze out every possible ounce of fun and discovery out of the game.
Yes, some games are just so special to our heart that we can't leave. I also have so many titles I just need them on my hard disk all the time. Yeah, even though I'm not playing them all the time, I just want to either have the possibility or to test something. A new map, a new mod, a new feature I discover. That's a great thing. Even though if the games are so old, there's always something you missed, something you never heard about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think Racer is definitely in that category of like always having something that is yet to be revealed about the game, some new bug or glitch or hidden feature. It always delivers. And I can't believe that to this day we're still finding new things out about the game.
I wonder, did you ever get in touch with any of the developers or did they maybe stumble over your Discord?
There have been moments when I guess members of the community have reached out to, I think the most active developer is, of course, John Knowles, who has actually been interviewed by, I would say YouTubers like you who are really interested in like documenting and archiving and really just passionate about these games. So he was like the lead designer on Racer, and it's more or less a footnote in his super long career in games and like his career at LucasArts. So it's kind of hard to approach that where it's like, hey, I want to talk to you specifically about a little game that you worked on 27 years ago at this point, and I want to try to dig into like the most niche thing that you may or may not recall at all.
Yeah, especially if they have a long history of developing games, it's, I would say, very hard for them to remember special details.
But the stuff he's already talked about is so valuable. Like, there's a number of podcasts where he has talked about his time working on Racer, and like even talking about how he designed like the flagship track, the Boonta Classic, and the challenges that they faced, and like they discovered in testing that players really liked to go off of jumps and be airborne, and so they added a bunch of jumps to the game. So hearing about that kind of stuff is just so like it just feeds my soul when I'm like so dedicated to this game, and hearing about, you know, someone who helps create it and bring it to life.
Do you maybe know for which platform the game originally was designed for?
I believe it was, oh man, there's a correct answer to this question, and I may not have it, but I believe it was the N64. I think at a certain point it might have been an N64 exclusive, so I know that was kind of like the major platform that it was originally intended for.
Which would make sense because it was really, really a big game for the N64 back then.
For sure, yeah.
You mentioned already the different maps, the racers, little in-game features. What would you say are your favorites?
Oh man. I definitely remember Sebulba as a kid, because like you didn't unlock Sebulba until, you know, you beat the Boonta Classic, which is the track from the movie. So just being able to unlock him and play as like the bad guy from the movie was the coolest thing as a kid. When I got back into the game, it was definitely Bullseye Navarre, because he has like the best turning, and as a controller player, like you definitely want more responsive pods. A lot of the pods can feel very stiff, so he feels extra responsive. And then nowadays, I guess I'm back to Anakin. So as far as racers, that's kind of been the journey. For track, I have to say Abyss, and I think this is one of the tracks that people will know by name because it's the track that is in the invitational circuit that's like only 4 tracks long. But it's the track that like no one got past because it was like 2 levels of track, and if you fell down, you had to go an extra long route and you would fall behind all the opponent racers. So it's like staying on the top track was paramount to actually beating that track. And it's a track that gets a lot of critique from the community nowadays for like having a strong concept but a weak execution, because it's so buggy for trying to do that. But I still love it despite that. And then for in-game feature, there's a lot. I think the boost mechanic definitely comes to mind first. Like you mentioned earlier, the sense of speed is really the thing that is so unique about this game. And I think the boost mechanic is definitely what contributes to that. A lot of new players have a hard time discovering for themselves. Like, you kind of have to guide them into figuring out how to boost, because it's a little hidden behind the fact that you have to hold nose down and then press a button. That being like sort of a hidden feature that it also has like so much nuance to it, like the boost thrust, like how much the boost contributes to your speed. changes depending on the racer, and that is not exposed anywhere in the UI. Like that was something that we had to sort of data mine to figure out. Another way you could have discovered it was through the in-game cheat menu, which showed all the like in-game racer stats. There's like 13 stats that make each racer unique, and the boost mechanic uses like the cool rate, the heat rate, and the boost thrust. Those are like the three main components that determine this huge mechanic in the game. There's so many like interesting things about the mechanics in the game, like that reveal a developer who had a lot of thought about like how these mechanics would intersect with each other and create like interesting moments in gameplay. For example, the boost mechanic, you can only boost when you're at 75% of your top speed. And then there's a terrain type in the game that's like slow terrain, that if you drive over it, it will reduce your speed by 25%. So those two mechanics are like counter to each other. So it's like if you're boosting in on a track and then you go into slow terrain or like off terrain, for example, there's this long stretch on the Gauntlet, your boost will start to decline, and then of course you'll have to cut the boost at a certain point, otherwise you'll overheat. But then there's this little moment where you can still boost because you're above 75% of your top speed, and that off-road terrain hasn't completely depleted your speed. So you have like one little window to do an after boost, and then that's it. Like you can't boost anymore. So I just love how those two mechanics intersect to really make like a fun little moment in the gameplay. And I don't know if that's by design, like that has to be by design, but just looking at like the data mining and like the code that we've reverse engineered, you maybe wouldn't like see that on paper, but in gameplay it's evident and it's there.
I think it's so amazing that the developers really showed us that they loved the pod racing, but not only that, that they also really went beyond of fan service and gave us such a unique and detail-rich game.
Definitely. I would say there's like a super unique feeling to the gameplay where it's like it actually feels very stiff and very like I don't know what's the other word. Anyway, it's super sticky. And a lot of like sci-fi racers, they can feel very floaty and very like you're constantly sliding. But in this game, you have so much control over that factor. Like you control whether you're sliding around or whether you're super glued to the track, even though you're floating like, 5 feet off the ground.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's a unique experience of speed you have here. Even though you don't have any real comparison to it in real life, there is no touching the ground. Yeah, it's just amazing to witness.
It's hilarious how these like terrain types in the game, like if you drive over ice, suddenly your pod it handles much more loosely, or you drive over lava and it's like it slows you down and heats up your engines. So it's just kind of funny that, you're not really making contact with the ground, but somehow, for the sake of interesting gameplay, the logic has to kind of break. And I think that's kind of how the whole Star Wars universe works as a whole, is like it may be illogical and it may not make sense, but it's cooler for it.
Yeah, and it still makes fun. But I totally see that this could be something which annoys a player. Is there something else which annoys you after so many years in game?
I think I mentioned before, but definitely the way that FPS affects traction. I think that's a major hurdle that a lot of players may have been turned off by, like to have to limit your FPS in order to get better speed running mechanics. I think may have deterred a lot of players along the way, but it's a challenge to patch out, and I think we're still exploring options for how to resolve that. But it definitely is on the list as like a major thing that needs to be kind of reworked. And it's a trap that a lot of games have fallen into that way that, you know, physics are ultimately determined by your frame rate.
Yeah, it's also interesting how much of this problem is a problem of the time, basically, because we are now, yeah, many Windows versions after the original Windows where it was released. So I'm not sure if it's a problem really of the game itself or how our operating systems are handling the game.
I mean, I think it was, I guess you could have called it a non-issue for back then because it was like a very consistent frame rate for, you know, say the N64. But when it comes to trying to optimize the game for speedrunning, of course, speedrunners are going to exploit whatever they can in order to get the best times, and limiting your frame rate is one of those things, unfortunately. And now it's become like, you know, in order to even get anywhere near the top of the leaderboard, you may need to kind of sacrifice your frames in order to get there.
It's, well, just another proof that communities get creative.
Yeah.
Another thing where they are getting creative is the modding side. I never knew that there is a modding side in this game. How active is it, and yeah, what mods can you recommend basically?
I would say the modding scene is at a super healthy state right now relative to previous years. Like if you had asked me this question maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been, you know, super dead. There was a time when a lot of the people who were secretly working on modding projects were kind of like siloed off and didn't really communicate with each other effectively. It was kind of one of those things where each individual was like, you know, at a certain point, I will reveal all and I will finish everything to a perfect state and then come back and be like, look at what I have created. Look at look at this magnificent mod. And that doesn't really work for, you know, this game. And so one person I have to really credit with like breaking the mold on that was Tim 707 in our community. He was like a super talented modder that came out of nowhere that like really kind of made all these like little separate modding projects finally come to a head and finally merge into a cohesive effort. And so now that's where we are at today, where it's like a super healthy like modding scene that has now had a major breakthrough in a 3D model replacement feature. So Tim has, one of his main efforts has been creating a new renderer for the game, and that has now allowed us to essentially replace any model we want in the game. Right now, you can replace like racers really well, and track replacement is still kind of in development. But really, all that is dependent upon really talented 3D artists, of which we have one right now, but I would love to see more people hop onto that effort, because it's like one of the things that, you know, new players come along and they're like, oh man, it would be so cool to see like a proper remaster of this game, or a HD remaster, and that is totally on the table now thanks to Tim's efforts. Another modder, Tillman, has also contributed to a lot of not just Tim's projects, but also the efforts of sort of understanding the asset file system in the game and really kind of decompiling how all that works. So that is definitely, I think, a mod that will appeal to most newer players, is the ability to replace the low poly assets of the game with like super high poly, super polished, you know, AAA assets. One mod that would more appeal to maybe the speedrunning scene is called Anadu. That's made by one of our community members named Galeforce. He made it specifically for the speedrunning scene. It includes features like save stating, a lot of quality of life stuff, HD fonts, and like, you know, skipping menus and fast restarts. just to help you in your practice sessions. There's also a free cam and a collision viewer that is something that Tillman contributed to. So that all adds up to make a really healthy experience for speedrunners. And it's super awesome to see. One effort that I've been working on personally is the Blender add-on for Star Wars Racer assets. I made it specifically to work on custom tracks in the game because I think that would add so much replayability for this game. Is the ability to, like, say, port over tracks from other games or even create your own tracks. And that's something that we're already seeing. Like, I've already been able to port over like the Mario Kart 64 tracks and like a bunch of other random tracks from random games. It's so fun to see it like working in Racer, and it's so trippy to see, like, especially for a new player to come along and go, whoa, I didn't think this was possible at all. So having that moment is so gratifying to me, to see someone be so rewarded by it and so tickled by it.
Sounds really like you have a bright future. It's, yeah, amazing that you can mod this and add more content to it. Can't wait to play more of that. But another thing I really would like to know is, since I just more or less reinstalled the game, played a few tracks, what would you recommend a new player the first time playing this game?
I would definitely recommend, especially if you're buying on PC, you're going to have a lot of technical difficulties in getting the game running, which is unfortunate, but it is sadly the truth. And really, you're going to need to have like a support system of people who have gone through all that before. And the way you're going to get that is via the Discord. So I would highly recommend joining the Discord, or, looking around on the Steam forums and finding that support that you're going to need, especially when getting the game running for the first time, and also optimizing it and learning the mechanics, because there's a lot of mechanics to kind of balance and understand and get good at. So whenever a new player joins the Discord, there's always this phenomenon that happens. Like, it's like a dog pile advice. Like, we're all so eager to help out and be the person who helps a new player that I worry it becomes overwhelming for that person to be confronted by so many voices like, hey, you should do this, or hey, you should do this. But I hope it just, gets them to where they need to be.
But to be honest, this is a really good problem to have. It's nice. But what would you say are your wishes for the future of the game?
We definitely have big dreams for every possible scene in this game. I would say the speedrunning scene definitely wants to see tracks or more competitors, especially. They would love to see a lot more competition, especially at the higher levels. And that's a little hard to come by when you have to dedicate like so many hours of your life to, getting good at this. But I think having like the modding support would definitely allow for the PC scene to be way more accessible to players. And I think that's definitely a direction that we're moving toward. Another scene is the tournament scene that we have constantly been working on ways to optimize the player experience and the audience experience. And one way it has been through like, that we've done this year is through like an API system that kind of allows for more easier management of like the submissions of times and like score keeping and all that, all the behind the scenes stuff that happens on the technical side for a tournament. So that's where that scene is headed. Another scene is the sort of the random challenge scene that I mentioned before, like having more replayability and be able to move that from not just interacting with like a bot in Discord to like actually having it all happen natively within your game using a mod would be super cool to see. And having like the ability to browse and download custom tracks within your game would be an end goal for us as well. So just having all these systems that are kind of brewing on the side and integrating them directly into the game and allowing for, a new player such as yourself to just come in and see it all at once within the game and super accessible, and you're not constantly fighting the game and all its technical quirks and trying to install this but it doesn't work, but you have to, all trying to get rid of all that stuff. So just trying to put the game into more players' hands and make it feel more rewarding and more replayable is the state that we're trying to get to.
Sounds really amazing what you have planned here. And I really can hear your passion. It's, yeah, nice what you're doing there.
Well, it's really a community effort. We have so many people who are super passionate about this game and are really dedicating a lot of their free time to making this all happen, and it's super awesome to see.
Well then, moving slowly to an end of our chat here, I would say we go again more in the route of your personal history. Can you maybe share some of your favorite memories about the game?
I think what I most fondly remember is the multiplayer scene that I first joined in 2018, and just having a blast, like racing each other online. I mean, that in itself was like something that none of us like imagined, I guess, as kids. Like maybe if you played local co-op, you kind of get a taste of that, but like seeing, 8 to 10 people in the same lobby and all racing together was just a blast. And I would love to, revive that someday. As far as like the modding scene, like seeing stuff that I feel like has never been seen before is always so fun and exciting, and being able to hang out with other people in the Discord in like the voice channel and be streaming your screen, and then like something happens that you're just like, oh man, I never thought this would be possible, but it's happening right now on my screen, and it's just like sharing that moment with everyone else is so fun.
You touched on something I wanted to ask you before, but I forgot. Have you ever experienced a LAN party atmosphere?
You mean like live in person?
Exactly. Did you ever experience a LAN party for this game where you had, for example, 4 or 8 other players?
Not for this game, but I know people in the community have done that, like with their family and friends. One of the members who was super active during that multiplayer phase in 2018, like they always talked about everyone kind of like joining one of those major LAN events, and I think that would still be really cool to do, but it's never really happened. So I would love to see that happen.
Definitely. I experienced some of those LAN party tournaments myself, and it's a special atmosphere. But yeah, I would say we are closing this one off, and I'm opening the mic to you. Is there anything you would like to add? Anything we missed?
Well, I mean, thank you so much for allowing me to blab on and on about I'm passionate about, and that a host of other people are super passionate about. One thing right now that is happening is our 6th annual tournament. So we have been doing these sort of small scale but annual tournaments that are super fun to watch. They're happening infrequently, maybe 2 to 3 every other week now. And that will be going on for a few months as the tournament goes into its final phase, and they're always super fun to watch, especially as we approach the end of the tournament into the grand finals, just to see the level of racing on display. So that's super fun, especially if you want to participate in, say, like next year. What else? Oh, so for the modding scene, we definitely are in need of 3D artists. So if anyone is out there like that who is interested in contributing to maybe a HD remake of the game, we would love to have you. And then for anyone who is interested in speedrunning the game, I know our speedrun scene always is welcoming in new members and always invites competitors. And we always love to see sort of the journey that racers make as they go from beginner to super advanced racer in the game. And it's super awesome to see that development over time. And I think that's everything. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on again.
You're more than welcome. It's, like I said, always really nice to hear that there is a community out there which is still active and there is so much passion out there. So yeah, thank you for all you're doing there and keep it all alive. But yeah, I would say that's it for this video. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.